All right, it's Friday night. Time to talk triathlon.
Friday night in Vegas. We're
Yeah,
both in Vegas again.
man, and our Golden Knights team continues to be active in trading players. It's changing the
Yeah.
landscape of the team.
But I think honestly, we weren't planning on talking about this, but I think it's for the best. You know,
Well, it's dynamic, and it is a business, and I think that's sometimes the hard part of professional sports is it's a business. You got to make business decisions sometimes. Now, what's interesting, I remember years ago when they prior to them coming here, or actually no, it was after the first year they were so successful. I remember I was in a presentation from one of their contract lawyers, and they were talked about how when they started the team, there was a lot of parity in terms of pay.
yeah.
And they actually thought that that was a reason why everything was going so well. And then they were wondering what was going to happen when you start having these, dichotomy of contracts, I guess. I don't know. It's strange.
It's really interesting in that sport. Obviously with Fleury being traded this week and everything. I was joking around with Marie because we were actually talking about it, and I'm like, yeah, well, next thing that's going to happen, Bank of America is going to trade you to Wells Fargo, and she's like, no, that trade's not going to happen. She's like, maybe I'd go to this bank or this bank, but I'm not going there. And I'm like, isn't that weird though? Like,
Yeah.
what other like other than sports, you don't get traded.
No,
Like
no.
our university is not gonna be like, hey, we're going to send you up to Utah, and
Yeah.
it's isn't that a weird thing though? Really?
No, and the stress of that, where, if you're young, okay, yeah, no, I'll go to Chicago, that'd be fine. But, if you've got a family and you're established and you've got houses that, a house that you've bought or
Kids in
uh,
school,
a
the
whole
whole thing.
nother,
Yeah,
yeah, a
yeah.
whole life balance part, which is, now that is what we struggle with as a triathlete. And I guess that's our segue into the
Yes.
health of the triathlete.
Health of the triathlete, the mental and physical health of triathletes.
Yeah.
So let's actually start out with this. So we're going to talk about triathlon health today, and both short term and long term. And so, John, it's interesting. Like I've told my students this before, I've told others this before. The level of triathlon that you and I have competed at is probably not the healthiest, right? And but in some ways it's really healthy, right?
Hmm.
We both, you and I both look back, if you look back 15 years ago, we were overweight,
Oh yeah.
right? We were not probably in what we would consider great health.
Hmm.
Now both of us are pretty good body weights.
Hmm.
Or if you look at our blood sugar control, probably really good. Our liver enzymes probably really good. But at the same point, we are stressing our bodies,
Yeah.
right? And oftentimes I think in unhealthy ways.
Hmm.
You know, I really wonder, in an Ironman build, a full Ironman build, or even a 70.3 build, am I actually taking time off of my health span?
Yeah. Right.
Right. And actually that's a good thing we should talk about really quick. The difference between health span and lifespan.
Yeah. I haven't used the term health span. How are you using that?
Okay. So lifespan is how long you live. Health
Right.
span is how long you live healthy.
Oh, yeah. I've
So
exceeded that.
yeah, yeah. But you know what I'm saying? So for example, if you develop, I don't know, some like coronary artery disease and you can't get around and
Mhm.
that's not living that's the end of your health span,
Right.
right?
Mm.
So I think that both of us have probably extended both health span and lifespan longer than if we wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah. This is the just the tug of war here between participating in a sport that's supposed to make us healthy, but then going too far. And I think, and as you start off, I got back into the sport mostly to get back into health
Me too.
and losing some weight. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and I needed to try to figure out how to get moving again. And so in one sense, this moves us in the right direction. But you're right. Once you start doing an Ironman build, that's a big time commitment, and that is a big risk for physical injury as well as mental health injury.
Yeah, and let's actually, I want to separate out physical injury from just what's the word, physiologic injury,
Hmm.
right? So physical injury, yeah, maybe you strain your hamstring during this, or you injure your knee during this, but then we also have this other systems of the body, right? The the endocrine system in particular. So the
Hmm.
hormonal system can take an absolute beating. The cardiovascular system can take a beating. I mean, you go into the literature, there are lots of older athletes that have arrhythmias,
Hmm.
and they contribute it to all of this training, especially training at too high
Yeah.
of intensities too often. And these are just a few of those things. So I do think that we need to be aware of these things and understand. And here's the things, and you and I think, because we're in the business, understand the risk a lot more, and understand the reward a lot more
Hmm.
than just, and I don't want to belittle people, but the average person, they think that, because this happens to me all the time. People look at me, oh man, you're so healthy. Really?
Hmm.
Have you seen my EKG? Have you seen my blood work?
Yeah.
Right? Just because I look one way doesn't mean I am one way.
Well, and that's good because we're going to get to this paper in a little bit. And I do believe now that you mention that, that is actually one of the issues that they raised in the paper
Yep.
in terms of perceptions we have about people and about health. And sometimes our perceptions can be really wrong. And so I like that. Now, maybe I like how you're talking about lifespan and health span, but maybe we even need to sort of put a definition around injury, because I know we've talked about this before, but injury in amongst itself is a little hard to define. And so sometimes when you dive into the literature and you start looking at even injury rates or how often someone gets injured in a particular sport, the numbers can be all over the map. For example, I'm familiar with the running research, injury research, and depending on which paper you pick up, you can track 100 runners training for a marathon, and one paper may say, well, 25% of them will get injured, and another paper will say 75% will get injured during the course of training for the marathon. And probably the biggest difference between those numbers is how they're defining injury. And that is a little bit you've got to come up with an operational definition for injury. Well, you missed 2 days of workout or a week, or maybe it's a little different where it may just be that you're doing something that you're altering. We have some problem that causes you to alter your training program in some way, shape, or form.
But I would say, coming from the athletic training world, and speaking of the Golden Knights, so their athletic trainer is a friend of mine,
Hmm.
and he comes and guest lectures sometimes for us. It's great, but he's basically told me like a high percentage of their players are injured for months at a time, but they
Yeah.
keep playing,
Yep.
right?
That's right.
And it's the same with in triathlon. I mean, there's been times when I've been injured, but still been able to train
Yeah.
for potentially months. And so would that, you're exactly right. Would that show up on that metric if I didn't miss a day of training?
Well, and this is why, there's going to be fun talking about this paper. This is why it's hard to, when we start talking about injury, if we're in the research world, we need an operational definition to categorize someone as injured or not.
Yeah.
In the real world, injury is a continuum.
Yes.
It's not a binary. It's not yes or no, you're injured. It's, I'm injured right now. It's just how much is that injury, and is that injury that I'm having right now, is that going to stop me from training tomorrow? I hope not. And this is what you're mentioning with the hockey players. But from a research end, you got to put people in bins in order to try to start comparing things. And that's the hard part of this type of research, is no two injuries are exactly alike.
Yeah.
They're all, well, that. I mean, they're all,
Yeah.
you can put a broken bone, but how many ways can a bone break? And
Infinitely.
yeah, right.
True.
Yeah.
It's infinite. And no, John, you're exactly right with this. And so for research to get better, I think we all need to come up and define what constitutes a musculoskeletal injury,
Yeah.
right? And is it you miss a week?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. As long as we all agree.
Mm-hmm.
It missed 2 days? Okay, fine. We all agree, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how do we do it in triathlon? Well, you know what? I can't run, but I can bike
Yeah, that's right.
and I can swim. Because that's what
Mm-hmm.
we do as triathletes. It happens to me all the time. Oh, my knee starts to hurt when I'm on the bike. Okay, doesn't hurt when I'm running. Good, I'll run more.
Mm-hmm.
It's so that adds a little bit of a dichotomy to this that makes it even more difficult.
Well, and that's what's sort of neat about this discussion that we're going to have is that one's not right and one's not wrong.
I know, I agree completely.
But you've got to have the understanding of each of these worlds. From an applied world, injury is a continuum of issues, but in a research world, they've got to put a context on defining an operational definition on injury. And as long as you understand those two worlds, you can try to bring them closer together. But you can't just look at a paper and say, oh, well, 75% of your marathon runners got injured. Well, it depends on the context of how that research team defined injury. And then you may say, oh, okay, that 75% is not, maybe that's not dramatic, but maybe the 25% is the dramatic end. And those are the ones that you want to pay attention to in terms of how you're going to train someone to avoid that 25% where they need to take time off.
Well, and then obviously you need to take it another step further too and separate out acute versus chronic, right? So if I crash my bike,
Mm-hmm.
that's not a training planning error. It's a training error, but it's not a training planning error. But it could take me out 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. And so do they get lumped into the injured part of the study?
Yeah. What happens if you stub your toe in a door during a training program?
If you
2
crush
weeks
your
before
toe,
your race.
yeah. But what bucket would you fall in for being stupid?
Yeah, exactly. Clumsy.
Yeah.
The clumsy bucket.
So I really think that most of the research that I've read actually teases those people out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It is because really what we're mostly concerned about in triathlon is chronic injury.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then, I love so this paper, John, do you want to put the link in the?
Yeah, I was just doing that and I posted the wrong link here. Let me do the future proof. There it is. Okay. Yeah.
So the thing that I've always found interesting is when we look at the number of training sessions per week of triathletes compared to anybody else. Now, I don't want to say anybody else because I think maybe heptathletes, decathletes, like they probably do even more. But this paper said this was people going to the Olympics. Now, obviously, a little different than what we're talking about, but they said it was 16 training sessions per week. Female, so what was the average female? 796 sessions in 50 weeks.
Yeah.
Approximately 16 training sessions per week.
Yeah.
And then Nordic skiers who are also completely nuts, 11 sessions per week.
I think there's a lot of cross training in Nordic skiing too. They're not just skiing; they're also biking,
running,
maybe roller blading. I don't know. Yeah,
roller skis. Yeah,
roller skiing. Right.
So if you think about that, so John, we talked about this last week. How many sessions do you do a week?
Yeah. Well, I do 18, but you shouldn't be.
So you're doing 18 per week. I'm doing, I don't know, 12, 14 on the week. So if I was a cyclist and I went to my cycling coach, how many cycling coaches would say, hey, you need to do 14 sessions a week?
Yeah, right. They may be doing 7 a week.
Maybe 7 a week, more like 6.
Yeah.
Right. If I went to a running coach and I told them, hey, I want to do 14 sessions a week, they're like, what? You're crazy. Like you're going to do 2 a day every day?
Yeah.
But we do, right? You do 3 a day. There's a lot of times I'll do 3 sessions a day.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where the runners, where they talk about in this paper, the runners had, the second most frequency of training is because a lot of people are doing 2 a day in running, morning session, afternoon.
But this was world-class marathoners.
Yeah, right.
If we were to take an age group marathoner, and I've looked at some people's training data that are age group marathoners, maybe 8 sessions a week. And that's on the high end. And I'm talking people, good marathoners, like running like 245s, like no slouches here, right?
Right.
Where I would consider almost the same fitness level as like a high level age group triathlete. So they're doing 8, a triathlete maybe doing 14 to 16. So then when we think about health, who's healthier?
Yeah. Or who's at a greater risk of an overuse injury?
Then that's what I'm getting at, like with both sides, right? So physiologically healthier, psychologically healthier. Like, I honestly was thinking about this earlier this week before you even brought up this paper, was, how much training is actually necessary?
Then you need to figure out the minimum dose, minimum effective dose.
You do, but John, if you really like training,
yeah, that's right.
Like, I love going for a bike ride. Like, it's my happy place nowadays.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoy running. And I'm starting, after our podcast,
there you go.
I'm really starting to enjoy swimming.
There you go. You gotta fake it.
Don't tell anybody, but I'm really starting to enjoy swimming.
That's good.
And so, yeah, so I actually think I do more than the minimum effective dose because I really enjoy it. But at what cost?
Well, and so I think that's the context of this paper. So the paper goes into triathlon in general is thought to be a healthy sport. And I think health, let's just take that as a holistic, perspective, that we, we're health, like you said, physiologically, mentally, we're just healthy. Is that good enough definition for a holistic perspective of health? And in general, you think of triathletes as being working towards good health because they're swimming, they're biking, and they're running, and maybe at moderate rates. But this paper talks more about the going more towards the high end athlete, and I think a lot of age groupers naturally go in that direction. And you and I both know a lot of examples anecdotally of people who've they've gone over the edge and they've trained too much and they've actually gotten to an unhealthy range. And I say that today as I lost my temper, changing a tire, but it was hot out. I was in the garage, but I know when my temper snaps like that, I know I'm close to the edge on being unhealthy.
Yeah. John, I'll tell you, and we've talked about this before, I've gotten to those points. And, I do a lot of blood work on myself. And it's really interesting. Like, my blood work is not ideal.
Well, okay, hold on. When you say not ideal, are you referring to the ideal ranges on the blood report?
No, because the ideal ranges in the blood report don't tell you anything.
Not for someone training, right?
You need to dig deeper, and there's actually there's some good websites you can look at, good articles from most of them from the Australian Institute of Sport, where they actually post norms of athletes, right? Because you cannot look at your blood work compared to norm values, because norm values are built off of the population as a whole for that lab. So my lab compares me to everyone else in Las Vegas. Well, have you been to the DMV? Right? Like, I guarantee you, like, yeah, if we're talking about health, I'm healthier than most of the people at the DMV.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
But the fact that I have a low white blood cell count, is that a good thing or not a good thing? When we look at endurance athletes in general, they in general have low white blood cell counts. Well, your white blood cells, John, what are they for?
Oh, the immune system.
That's your immune system, right?
Yeah.
Well, COVID Delta variant going around and all this stuff going around, and supposedly endurance athletes have good immune systems, but why do we have low white blood cell counts? And so, but then if I look at the norm table out of the Australian Institute of Sport, they actually say that triathletes in general have the lowest white blood cell counts.
Mm.
So now, okay, so now I fit into the norm there, but then does this mean I'm going to get sick more?
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I'm getting at is when you really dive into it. And the truth of the matter is, your physician, my physician, we're not going to say names, some are better than others at interpreting these things, but most physicians look at you're in the normal range.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what if I'm on the low end of normal of everything? Am I still normal? Is that still good? And now once again, you're comparing me to a relatively sick population.
Mm-hmm.
And, personally, I want to be optimal. I don't want to be on the low end of a range. I want to be in the optimal range.
And I think this is where maybe we're jumping around a little bit, but that's okay. This is where you've got to have a good relationship with your medical team, your physician, the nurses in your facility that you go to. You really got to have a good relationship. And I know I've talked with you about this. I've built a good working relationship with my rheumatologist.
Yeah.
But when we started, actually, my first rheumatologist fired me, and then
Rightfully so.
it did. The first rheumatologist, well, one of the early rheumatologists I had, was trying to get me back to functional daily tasks, walking, being able to stand and teach. And I'm like, that's not what I want. I don't want to just be able to walk. I want to be able to run. I want to be able to bike. I want to be able to swim. And so we had a hard time sort of connecting on information. And so he'd look at the information, the data, and he'd think, oh, you're doing fine, to be able to walk, to be able to be active. But I'm like, that's not what I want. And so then eventually I went and got another rheumatologist. And that sort of same relationship started out that way. But eventually that rheumatologist who I'm working with now, he finally got it. He saw what I was trying to do. He said, okay, now let's try to figure out the right med to be able to help you achieve this. And it's not what other people with rheumatologists need. And so we needed to take a little bit of risk on some meds, and it panned out. But it only panned out because he finally understood where it's going. And so, long story, but I think to your point that you've got to have a good working relationship with your physician, so that when they look at the reports, they can look at it with that eye, that you're an active person, you're training for an event of whatever distance.
Yeah, you just don't roll into the office and like, oh, okay, yeah, you have a pulse of a resting pulse of 48, and your blood pressure is low. Oh, you're good, you're healthy. Well, if I'm healthy, why would I be here?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And so the conversation I had with my physician, the first time we sat down and had a conversation, I said, listen, I want to be optimal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yep.
care about normal. I don't care about me comparing to everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be optimal for me.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, there's not too many physicians that are even willing to go down that road,
Mm-hmm.
or know how to go down that road.
Right.
Really, we're a subset of the population.
Yep.
So I love the fact that your rheumatologist fired you.
Yeah.
And honestly, John, he should have, right?
It was a bad match.
Because it was a bad match. He wasn't able
No.
to help you to be who you wanted to be.
No, that's right.
And he didn't understand that you were willing to take risks. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. Like, I've talked to my physician about, like, I'm willing to try things and to take risks to become optimal. And if it doesn't work, okay, I'm healthy enough to go down another road.
Yep. No.
Because I guarantee you, John, you go to pretty much any GP in Las Vegas or anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and you or I walk in there, they're gonna take one look at us and go, "Why are you here?"
Yeah. Right.
Right? Oh, your white blood cell count's a little low.
Mm-hmm. No. And you hear lots of anecdotes like this where people go in and they're just not feeling right, but they're not able to get the help until they find that right physician. And so having that physician is, and building that relationship takes a little bit of time and effort, but it is worth it when you're able to establish that.
I can remember the first time I went to a physician with my genetic report.
With
man,
which report?
my genetic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, really? Oh, neat.
And they're like,
I
oh,
haven't done that.
they just kind of like poo-pooed it.
Yeah, right.
And I can remember we were talking about it. It was I had a genetic predisposition to not metabolize B12.
Mm-hmm.
So I was concerned about that, right?
Mm.
And they're like, "Oh, you can't put anything into this." I'm like,
Right,
"Well,
right.
can we at least test my B12?"
Yeah.
Oh, you look healthy, and I'm like,
Perceptions.
I'm giving you information, and like
Hmm.
this was probably 10 years ago, or maybe 8 years ago when I first got my genetics ran, and you know the doctor kind of poo-pooed it, like, "Oh, that's."
Yep.
So, anyways,
All right.
since
Well, and so now let's get into the paper. Let me just show which paper it is. Um, this is the paper, Future Proofing Triathlon, Expert Suggestions to Improve Health and Performance in Triathletes by Kennedy and colleagues, out of your friends up in University of Alberta, Calgary.
yeah,
Oh, it's out of
no,
Canada.
that's in Edmonton. We don't like them.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, just so you know,
Oh,
like,
yeah, it's in Edmonton. Right.
or as we call it in the business, Deadmonton.
So this paper is a paper, not an experiment so much, but it's a paper talking about perceptions and guidance from lots of different perspectives, which is really interesting on how to continue triathlon to be a healthy sport.
Yeah.
And then, so let's see, I'll go through just a little bit on the methods. They were basically did a lot of discussions with coaches uh, and researchers and anyone else who was at this conference, which was on the sports science uh, conference back in 2017. That was up in Canada. And so anyone who was doing work from any end on triathlon science was invited to be part of this discussion. And so they had a lot of people talk, and they listened to a lot of their feedback, and they had guided discussions, all this type of work, trying to just discover ideas, which ended up being really neat. What did you think of the approach and or
Well, I love the approach because you know what? These are real people with real opinions, and they're people in the triathlon business, right? Either as researchers or as coaches. And I think for a long time there's been this kind of undertow of like the coaches are over here, the researchers over here, and there's nothing, there's nothing in between, right? The coaches are the art, the
Mhm,
researchers are the science. So to actually get kind of both perspectives in one paper
mhm.
was really, really good. And and because of the way this was presented, I love the fact they had all these little quotes.
Yeah, I copied and put some down in my notes. And so the whole idea of what they're trying to do is future-proof triathlon. So they're trying to come up with guidance on how triathlon can continue to be or can be a healthy sport. So they came up with 5 themes.
Yep.
You want to just go through them?
Yeah, where are they?
I've got them written down. So because I like these and we've already been talking about some of these. So the first thing that they came up with after talking with all these folks was critical appraisal and application of knowledge, critically evaluating research. And I like that because that's actually what I work with my students on, is how to critically evaluate research. And that's what, the basis of this podcast is evidence-based triathlon, and that, we're closer to the research end than a lot of people because we do a lot of reading. We work with a lot of students who are doing research projects. We guide them, and the research projects are all predicated on an understanding of the literature, which is peer-reviewed, which is supposed to be a rigorous process to get something published, which means it's gone through several sets of eyes before it's actually in print. And so it has a certain level of rigor to the way that they've tried to answer questions. But you have to read it carefully, and you have to critically evaluate these papers, because a single paper is not a gold standard nor is it necessarily the answer to a particular question, because there's lots of little things that we do in experiments that can influence the outcome of the study.
No, I completely agree. And the critically appraising research is very, very difficult.
Hmm.
And so they mentioned this, that, so how does this get disseminated into the population, right? Because most of the population cannot critically appraise it. So we actually have others critically appraise it and put it into layman's terms. So, for us, we might read it in Triathlete magazine,
Hmm.
or we might see it on Slow Twitch, like somebody reads an article and then everyone comments on it, right? And that's still not critically appraising it.
Yeah.
That's somebody else critically appraising it
Hmm.
and giving their opinion. And it's funny, I've seen people critically appraise a paper, and I'm like, that's not what I got out of it,
Yeah.
right? And and I think a lot of it, and John, they I don't think they talk too much about this, but there's so many biases, right?
Yeah.
And so if you already believe something in your heart of hearts, and you read something that goes against that,
Yeah.
you may read it in a completely different way than if I'm a fanboy of that theory,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
So
No, and that's a big part of training students and continuing to train ourselves, is to try to be unbiased. But we all have biases. We all have, ideas that influence our interpretation of something. And so, but that's why it's great to. That's why the peer review process ends up being important, because you put that out in front of other people who have their biases, but hopefully those biases are different than ours. And before it's published, it's been vetted in a way. But so you try to catch some of that. But the one bias I like that they brought up in this paper, which is really good to remember when we're doing this type of research on injured athletes, is survivorship bias.
Oh, I love this one.
I didn't catch that, and I really like that phrase. I'm going to use that in teaching. So,
Okay,
do you want to?
can I give you an anecdote on this one?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Anecdote. So this is a long time ago. I was an athletic trainer for it was at a U.S. national team for soccer, a camp to select youth kids to go into the national team. So like these are the best 100 kids in the country were invited.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember just talking to the head coach. We're just having dinner and just chatting, and I was asking him about burnout rates of these 15 and 16-year-old kids, and them playing. Some of these kids honestly were playing 300 games a year, because they're
Yeah,
playing this
right.
team and this team and this team. And I asked him about it. He said to me, Ted, honestly, I hate to tell you this, I don't care, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to get the 16 kids or the 20 kids that eventually will produce two kids
Yep.
that will be on the U.S. national team,
Yep.
playing in the Olympics, playing in the World Cup. And it's those two kids that survived
That's right.
that we care about.
Yeah.
And he said that's not something that'll be in the press. That's not something that'll be in because that's not the sexy thing.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the kids that there's something about them, and what it is psychologically, they're just built different. Maybe
Yeah.
they have, I don't know, there's so many genes that now we know about, as far as recovery and collagen uptake, and
Mm-hmm.
all of those things that those kids survive. So then you look at the research and well, we look at the US national team for soccer. Well,
Mm-hmm.
Look at how healthy these kids are. They look how good they are.
Yeah.
Not thinking of the tens of thousands
Mm-hmm.
that literally either injured their way out or couldn't
Yeah.
handle couldn't handle the training, couldn't handle the games, couldn't handle. And so this is when I read this, I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
light bulb moment.
Yeah.
And the Olympics are a perfect example of this.
I was going to mention that the Olympics is a lot of survivorship bias. These are the ones who have made it through a program despite or in spite of coaching or training or research, and they've survived, and we've got to be careful when we're reading research and
Especially
research
on the
reports. That's right.
especially
That
the athletes.
Yep, that when they're describing their subjects, we got to be careful that they're not just studying survivorship bias.
So I don't know the exact collagen resynthesis genes off the top of my head, but did you watch the Tour de France this year?
No, I didn't.
So the same guy won it as last year, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things that we're commenting on is his ability to recover.
Mhm.
And they were talking to his coach or director or whoever, and they said he just has an ability to recover better than anyone they've ever had.
Right.
Well, so if you have that innate ability
Mhm.
to recover faster than everybody else,
Mhm.
like the truth is that's what steroids did for people,
Yeah. Right.
right? It didn't allow them to necessarily train hard, it allowed them to recover better.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
this guy can recover better than anybody else. So once again, yeah, we researched this guy, and he's like, well, this, and this, but he survived because of that,
Yeah.
right? Or you look at the Michael Phelps issue, right?
Mhm.
When he was winning all those gold medals, and they started publishing some of his training data, and the 70 to 90,000 yards per meters per week.
Mhm.
Well, how many youth coaches took that stuff and say, "Oh, we're
That's
doing
right.
it.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
I'm gonna produce the next Michael Phelps."
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're
Yeah.
gonna destroy a bunch of kids,
That's right.
and maybe once in a generation you'll get the one kid that it doesn't destroy,
Mhm.
and he becomes an Olympian. Like, it's super interesting to
Well,
me.
and the same thing with, the whole barefoot movement. I'm a big advocate for being in bare feet a lot of time.
Yep.
Being bare feet, throughout the day. Running a little different, but the running barefoot movement was largely predicated on a lot of anecdotes. And we think of the Tarahumara Indians that was talked about in Born to Run.
Yep.
Well, and that's the problem, is that they were talking about some really extreme barefoot runners, but we don't know how many barefoot runners in that Tarahumara tribe that never were able to do those extreme endurance feats. And so this is just something that when we're looking at literature, it's really important to look at who's the research subjects,
Yeah.
and their running, their endurance background, what level they are, what level athlete they are, their injury background, and that is a big part of driving the direction of the research outcome. And so it is really important to.
But it's very difficult because a lot of times in their methods they don't describe it enough,
Yeah.
right? So it'll be, okay, we had recreational athletes
Hmm.
between 30 and 35 or 30 and 40 with a VO2 max of 56
Yeah.
on average.
Yeah.
And that's all you get. And it's like,
And you
you're
get a
not,
convenient sample. Yeah.
you're not giving me okay, how many years have they been training?
Yeah.
How many years have they been competing? What level have they been competing at? Like, what does recreational mean? And then we're supposed to interpret, they're just because of their VO2 max. Well,
Yep.
VO2 max, some of it is genetic.
No, and this is a problem with a lot of our research, and we've mentioned this, in an earlier podcast, that our research is heavily biased towards the male,
Yep.
largely because researchers are a bit lazy, because you don't have to deal with trying to understand the hormonal impact of things on measurements you're making, if you're especially doing things over time. And so there's a bit of laziness there. There's also a bias in terms of age that we're looking at, because a lot of times you just recruit your college students into your study, and that's a challenge in our research. But another big challenge, and this is important for really athletes and coaches to understand, is our research is largely built around what we call group design, in that we take a group of 10 people, 20 people, 40, whatever it is, and we intervene in some way, or we have some experimental condition, and then we look and see how they've changed. And then we look at average response, and we try to see if that average response is the same or different between groups, or within a group, across an intervention. And the problem with that group design is that group design can sometimes mask the way individuals respond. And we see this all the time in the shoe research that we do. And I know we've touched on this before, but it's worth repeating, is that you and I can go into a lab and we can run in the same pair of shoes, but we can have very different responses. But if we start averaging people, averaging responses, we'll get an average response, but built around that average are people on each side of that average. And some people respond in one direction, some in the other, but you average those together and you get an average response, which may not be representative of the whole group.
Well, I think we did talk about this when we talked about the caffeine.
Oh yeah, even the caffeine, responders, non-responders, yeah.
And the
Yeah.
negative responders, right?
Yeah, and if you
When
pull
you
them
take them all,
together, you're going to get an average of 0.
yeah. Or you actually on that one, you get an average of it. Yeah, caffeine's going to help a little bit.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
if you have 100 people,
yeah,
on average, it'll help a little bit. But what about the 10% that it actually does negative to,
yeah.
right? Well, we don't care about them, right? But then, so John, obviously you've published a lot. So how do you do this where we can individualize it? So
Well,
what's the best
there is another way to approach research, and it's called a single subject design. It's a little different, but you start taking individuals and then doing repeated measures and then putting in an intervention, and then repeated measures, put in an intervention. So it's a little different type of design. It's actually comes from the psychology world, where they track people over a long period of time and get lots of measurements about that one person. And then you put those measurements of different people, and you can tell, you can point directions that they're responding in, and then you try to draw general conclusions off of that. So it's a different design to go down, but it's harder to get published that way because a lot of people think you're doing an N of 1 study, and you're not trying to do an N of 1 study. You're trying to do an N of whatever, 15, 20 people, but you're doing individual responses, and then you start trying to categorize them into different groups. So it's just a different way of approaching it.
I really like when some of the papers, it's group design, but they actually will put out the data,
Yeah.
actually each individual.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because then you could actually really get to it. So once again, I always maybe I'll come back to like the school model where you got 10 people in your class and you're looking at the class average, right? Well, if someone doesn't show up and they get a 0, if everyone else, let's say, averages at 80, now your class average might be 72.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's a good example. Yeah.
So what is that? I'm a poor teacher because my class average was 72. Mm-hmm. No, a kid didn't show up and took an F or took a 0. And it's the same it's the same in research. Like if someone, has a bad day, let's say we're doing, let's say one of our metrics is we're measuring how fast you can run a 5K, and they got a cold, but they still come out and they don't feel good. They did the intervention and all of a sudden, instead of running a 20-minute 5K, they run a 25-minute 5K. Well, that can skew everything, just one person.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And so seeing individual responses, and there are some papers that are doing this. I love it when you can do that. Or now you can they'll link, like in their article, link to a data table.
Yeah, that's you're right. That's actually a big movement. Yeah. Right. So future proofing, you got to critically evaluate the research. And as a practitioner, as an athlete, as a coach, you can't read one study and start making wholesale changes to your program, because you've got to really critically evaluate what's going on, and you got to look for other evidence. One study is not by itself is not going to really be as impactful on applied research. And so I like this category of future proofing, and I'd like to think that our podcast, our video cast here, is part of that, trying to help interpret some of the research that's out there and put it into application. All right, want to do number 2?
Let's do number 2.
Integrate approaches to developing, disseminating, and using research and expertise. Oh, I guess actually this is where our podcast falls.
This is probably closer to where it falls. And this is the model of having content experts break it down into reality, into the layman, maybe not even the layman, but the layperson's ability to communicate. Mm-hmm. Because honestly, some research studies are very, very difficult to read. Like you've got to be a content expert.
Oh, I have some papers that, especially when I was doing my PhD, I had some key papers that I probably read 20 times. And each time I read it, I picked up something a little different, because it's technical writing. we're not right. The way I describe technical writing is if you're enjoying reading it, it's probably not technical writing
Yeah,
because
true. I love that. I've never heard that before.
it's redundant. It's a very specific way to write. You have to have consistency in terms, consistency in saying things. So sometimes it comes across as being redundant,
Yeah.
but it's very concise, very succinct. You're not trying to take up a lot of space. You're not writing a lot of prose in there that is written to entertain. It's very detail orientated, and so it's it's not for everyone to read, and I think that's where it takes some effort to take a paper and then turn it around and say, here's really what it's saying, and here's its strengths, and here's its weaknesses.
Yeah. What does it mean?
Yep.
Right. That's what we're getting at, is having people explain what this paper means, what the context of the paper is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another piece is, it doesn't actually mean anything to you, right? Because the actual the consumer of this is like the triathlete, right?
Mm-hmm.
And does this actually mean anything to you? Because
Yep.
sometimes it won't mean anything to you,
Mm-hmm.
but often we need someone to disseminate that information.
Well, and I love it because this is where researchers need to be listening to the athlete and to coaches and to practitioners to design experiments that have meaning. I know when I get started, down my research path, I have a nice little research question that I ask is, why do we run the way we run? I love that question. I still ask it, and I still do experiments to try to answer that question. It doesn't have any real meaning. Well, I've got to search and see how can I apply that meaning to runners. But in essence, that question was really built as a theoretical question just to try to understand factors that influence running, and has led to some neat things. But now, in my phase of career now, I'm trying to take that research I've done and now turn it to something practical. And I think that that's where researchers need to be listening to coaches and need to listen to athletes in terms of designing experiment and knowledge that's helpful.
Yeah, no, I love it. But on the other side, sometimes it's difficult to work together, right? So
Yeah.
because the researchers I think would, for the most part, like to work with the coaches and the athletes, and the coaches and the athletes would like to work with the researchers, but neither really wants to change.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you mentioned it, like a researcher oftentimes has a pretty narrow research focus.
Yeah.
Right? And a coach/athlete, they have a really narrow focus as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to go to let's say, John, you and we came up with this awesome study we wanted to do,
Mm-hmm.
and we got in touch with some coaches, some triathlon coaches, and said, hey, we want to implement this. Man, it better be a little change.
That's
Right?
hard.
It better not be, hey, you're doing 16 sessions a week. We want to see what happens when you do 12.
Yeah. Or take a month off.
Yeah, we want to see what happens when you take a month off. They're going to be like, nah, we're good. We don't want to go down that road. But the truth is, maybe that's a great study, right? Because let's say we're looking at thyroid function.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, we know that endurance athletes in general have depressed thyroid function. So we're like, well, what happens if we take an endurance athlete, we measure their blood, give them a month off, look at their thyroid again? Does it rebound? Is it good?
Yep.
We'll never know the answer to that.
That's right.
But, well, the only way we'll know the answer to that is if they get injured to the point where they have to take a month off.
Yep.
But then there's stresses that are associated with that injury that could affect their thyroid, so we'll really never know.
It's tough, but I like this for future-proofing triathlon is that the guidance is you've got to get researchers and coaches and athletes talking to each other, and they need to respect each other in what they're bringing to the table in terms of whatever the issues are. And I think that is the only way to keep triathlon as a healthy sport is you are bringing these two groups together.
Yeah, and maybe we could find, we maybe not find an elite group that would do that, but you might be able to find like an age group that would do that, like after maybe their last race of the year, month off.
Yeah.
you might actually be able to find people to go
Mhm.
down that road with you.
Mhm. Mhm.
If that was the example. But it's hard, it's hard, it's really hard to get people to change the way they train
Yeah.
and or race, for research.
Well, we've seen it even with a study recently that a student was trying to do and trying to recruit triathletes into the study. But once triathletes hit their, even age groupers, once you hit your schedule and you're in your rhythm of working out, to all of a sudden throw in some intervention that's different, that's tough. That's a big ask. And so it's hard to do some projects, and so maybe we need to look at it and say, okay, maybe we need to do it a different way and build into it, and then
But the only way to do that is to do it together, right?
yeah,
Is
that's
to
right.
have the coach slash athlete and the researchers sit down
Hmm.
in the room and
Hmm.
think about the bigger picture and think
What's
about
practical, what's
what's
not, and
practical.
so
What are both sides willing to give up?
yeah.
Because
Hmm.
it almost it's a negotiation, right?
Yeah.
Like that needs to occur. Now, the other
Well.
thing that this paper said was, which was really cool, was that most of the researchers in triathlon, they're triathletes
Hmm.
and or they're coaches,
Yeah,
like
right.
a little side business of coaching. And so I don't necessarily think it's as far apart as we
Hmm.
often think either.
Right.
Because I don't know any, like I've read a lot of this triathlon stuff and I'll look up the people. Most of the people that are researching triathlon are triathletes.
Yeah, we will. You merge your interest with your work. Now, let me give you another example of how this worked. A couple years, maybe 3 years ago, I went over to the Fellowship of Speed with who designed. Dean Jackson organized this, and he had a whole bunch of different people come together and just sort of roundtable talk about how to go faster. And he had a Formula One uh, uh, car driver. We had an ex-Olympic athlete. We had some researchers, some faculty. And interestingly enough, one of the questions that came out of that was, "Hey, what happens when you got Tokyo Olympics coming up? What happens when the shoes get wet? And, does that lead to physiological challenges? Does it lead to do the shoes not perform well anymore mechanically?" And all of a sudden, we had some studies that came out of that. And actually, a student just did her thesis on that one. What happens to mechanical properties when the shoes are saturated with water? And it all came out of that. But that's a good example, I think, of bringing together people of different perspectives and then leading down the path of doing an experiment. It's just a small experiment that we did, but now you can build on it with some other things.
And look at the Olympics.
That's right. And then go to
It was,
Olympics, right?
but look at it. It was
Yeah.
soaking, right?
Yeah.
The men, it didn't rain, but
Mhm.
they were the wettest men I've ever seen
Yep. Yep.
that were in the water.
Hmm.
And the women's race was raining the entire time.
Yep.
I was watching them put their shoes on in T2 and they were soaked already.
Yeah. Right.
Right?
Right.
So now they got to run 10K in soaking wet
Yeah.
shoes. So
Right.
yeah, what does that do? And
What
you
kind of
know,
socks should you be wearing when that's the case, or any of that? Yeah. Those are some neat research questions that we can design these small experiments to try to answer. But it only happens, and that's why I like this as a category in future proofing. You've got to get people you got to get people with different perspectives to the table, and then try to generate the right knowledge, ask the right questions and generate the right knowledge.
yeah,
But we're only on category 2. We're going to do this again. We're not going to get through all
no,
these.
we're not gonna get through. Should we do one more?
All right. Number 3, appropriate development and use of measures for monitoring and training and recovery. I love this one.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I use Training Peaks.
Mhm.
I think you've used
I use Training Peaks. Yeah.
Training Peaks as well. So the one that blows my mind all the time to think about is CTL,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when I go into a big race, I would like my peak week, my CTL to be 140,
Right.
which is huge.
Mm-hmm.
That's I've only been able to do that a few times, but when I've been able to get there, either if I don't get injured, I'm good, right?
Yeah.
But what does it mean? Like,
Yeah.
is that
It's
mean
math.
it's just math, right? Here's the thing is I can develop a 140 CTL
Yeah.
by walking for 10 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean I'm going to be able to race fast?
Mm-hmm.
No. you know, literally, I could go for some really long hikes and do it every day,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and I could develop that CTL.
Yep.
And so they call in Training Peaks, I think erroneously, CTL equals fitness,
Yeah. Right. Right.
but it doesn't really think about how it doesn't, because it's math. There's no thought process to it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take into account necessarily how it's built. You could build
Mm-hmm.
140 CTL doing all high end interval work
Right.
and never go zone 2, right? And so I think that the metrics that we use, and the truth is, I'll throw this out, is the more and more I'm getting into this, CTL is becoming the new FDP.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well, but here's the other problem. Here's the other end of it.
Yep.
CTL is only a number that's built on whatever your watch enters into the program. And so you don't enter a lot of your daily stress.
Exactly. And your CTL is built off of your threshold run pace,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
your threshold bike, and your threshold swim.
Mhm.
And how many of you out there actually have that number? You test enough to
I don't have
know.
mine right.
I don't have mine right,
No.
right? Because you know, mine's honestly, my swim pace, I've increased it a little bit lately, and it's not right. And so I'm getting these crazy CTL numbers. And by the way, if you do a downriver swim and you do, I think I did a 105 per 100, and your CTL and your threshold pace is 140 per 100.
Yeah, Strava probably put some warning lights on you and said, "Hey, what'd you do? Did you drive or did you ride your bike and set swimming?"
Well, think about it. I did 25 minutes at 150% of my threshold.
Right.
Like, so I get this crazy high CTL number, but exactly. So, you know, the data is, in general, it's not great, right? Because we're
Hmm.
making all these assumptions. We're making the assumption that, like you just said, that my training is all I'm doing.
Yeah. Right.
Like, I don't know about you, but when I'm at the office, I take the stairs.
Hmm. Yep.
I
You
prefer
don't
to.
log it. You don't log it though.
I don't log every time I
No.
go up 4 flights of stairs and down 4 flights of stairs.
No.
You know, I take the dog for a walk. Usually once a day is my
Hmm.
job. Once a day is Marie's job. And, you know, I go 20, 30 minutes of walking. I try and go at a decent pace.
Yep.
I don't log that,
Yep.
right?
Now,
So
but the
it's
flip
interesting.
side is
Yep.
there's a lot of measurable data out there now,
Yeah.
and we wear a ring to, monitor our, or you've got a
I've got the
monitor on
ring and
your
I've got a ring.
wrist, or monitor your sleep. We just are exploring this EKG device, and we exchange some messages, and you commented, that's a lot of EKG data when you go for a 70.3.
5 hours of EKG data when you're looking at 20 seconds at a time.
That's a lot of EKG data. And so one of the neat things right now is there's lots of wearable technology.
Yeah.
The downside is there's lots of data, and trying to sift through that data to find the meaningful data is what you're talking about here with the CTL. Maybe it's not CTL right now. Maybe down the road it's going to be some other algorithm, and
Something else.
people are trying to explore and using machine learning to pull all this in. But back when I worked in cardiac rehab, I had a fellow nurse working with me, and sometimes I would just get drawn to looking at the EKG monitor while people were exercising. And boom, boom, boom. Oh, hey, boom, something's going on. Let me go find out what's happening. And he came over to me and said, "Don't treat the monitor."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What do you mean? This is EKG data." He says, "You never know what's going to happen." And I can't tell you how many times something did happen to the EKG, and you print up a strip and say, "Rick, something's going on. Something going on. There's this and that." He goes, "Oh, let's go. Oh no, the patch fell off."
Yeah.
Or it's loose, or something's pulling on a cable, or something, and all of a sudden you're getting erroneous data. And so his point was always treat the patient. Use the monitor to try to help understand what patient you need to go talk to right away, but you've got to treat the patient before you treat the monitor. And I think that's so true in our sport, because we have so much information, and it may not always be the right information.
No, I think I actually completely agree with you. The information that we have, I'm gonna throw out a number. it may be 50% good data,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because honestly, what does it, what does it all really mean? Do I need to know my power all the time on the bike?
Yeah, right.
Do I need to know all these things? And
Mm-hmm.
and the thing that I'm getting to now is what's actionable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
So if I go for a day of, let's say I'm going to do 2x20 at FTP,
Mm-hmm.
or where my FTP, I think my FTP is, or just let's say 95% of it. Okay.
Yeah.
And I can't do it one day.
Mm-hmm.
Is that actionable?
Mm-hmm.
Should I change everything? And, you know, or did I not sleep well?
Right.
Or was my nutrition not on point? And so I think
Or
that,
did you just lose your temper trying to change a
yeah,
tire?
right. Or did your mind drift, right? Like something's
Yeah.
happening at work, or
Yeah.
someone's with your spouse, or your dog is sick, or whatever. There's so many things that go into it that we cannot just rely on the data. I love the fact you said treat the person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, let's say we do that 2x20 and we underperform. And then the next week we underperform and we do it again and repeat it
Mm-hmm.
again and we underperform. Okay, now is this becoming actionable?
Right.
Is my FTP set too high?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I'm getting at, right?
Oh, totally.
And the truth is, we don't know what's actionable
Mm-hmm.
because, how we don't even know how good our data is.
Mm-hmm.
How many people have tested their power meter
Yeah.
against another power meter, a gold
Right.
standard power meter,
Yeah.
right?
I'm quite certain mine's low.
Yeah, I'm on
But I've never
Zwift.
tested it.
I'm on Zwift all the time and on the groups, the chats with Zwift, and people are like, oh yeah, this power meter is 10%, gives me a 10% higher number, so I'm gonna use it on Zwift. Well, yeah, me too. If I had a 10% higher number.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think John, you're right. I think we don't have great metrics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you and I are collecting more metrics than most. I mean, the
Yeah.
last race I did core body temperature, I did
Mm-hmm.
EKG, I did on that EKG monitor. There's all these other things, like there was the what was it, how hard I'm hitting the ground.
Yeah. Right.
Was on
Right.
that one.
Mm-hmm.
What does it all mean?
Well, and what I liked about this article, again, it's future proofing.
Right.
And how do you
do we
keep
get there?
triathlon as a health or healthy? And so measuring things is important, but at the same time, getting that subjective input from the athlete is so critical right now. And we don't necessarily have a good way to measure that because it's subjective. It's not objective. And we want it to be objective. And this, again, if you can come up with an algorithm using, AI or, machine learning, that's great. But at the same time, you have to figure out how to bring in the athlete into the conversation. And I liked one of the notes I wrote down is don't let the data distract from coaching the athlete.
Yeah.
I think that was in the paper, and I like that. It's because you've got to, if you coach the athlete, or if you're the athlete and you're self-coach, you can't let the data distract you from the importance of how you feel.
Yeah, and you're 100% right, but it is distracting, right? Like, how many metrics do I have going at one time on my bike computer? I think I got 8, right?
Yeah.
How many are actually important? Honestly, maybe heart rate.
Yeah.
Because that's the only one that's truly a physiologic measure of what I'm actually doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, how many T-shirts or stickers do we see? If you find me on the ground, make sure you stop my watch, or upload the data to Strava. It hasn't happened. There's that whole culture and that mindset, and I do think Strava and any sharing of data can be unhealthy for some people, and I'm guilty of it too. I'm like,
I'm totally guilty of it. When I'm on a real epic ride, or I'm thinking, what's going to be a clever name?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's so stupid, but
Yeah.
but then again, maybe it is healthy because I actually, I don't know if I told you, when I started running, I had like the Nike app on my phone.
Yep.
And it was motivating to me.
That's the flip side to this. And that's the healthy side, is that it gets us going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back then, I don't know if you know, but Nike was kind of one of the first people to get into this.
Mhm.
And you had to have a little pod that fit in the bottom of your shoe. So you took the insole out and had a little foot pod in there. This is, pre-GPS, right? And all it did was measure,
Yeah.
I can't remember, I think it was just your speed and your cadence or something like that. And like, that was the coolest thing. It was like, oh man, like, and then, because when I started out, I was running a kilometer, right? 1K.
Mm-hmm.
The next week, 1.5K. And I'm like,
Yeah.
And that was very motivating for me.
Yeah. Oh, just the whole 10,000 steps.
Yeah.
That number has no meaning. There's no research behind it, but it was motivating and can be motivating getting people out.
I only have 3,000 steps today. Shoot, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, right.
No, I did ride my bike 45 miles, but I only have 3,100 steps. So I got to take Cosmo for a long walk tonight, I guess.
I love when my watch goes off. You met your goal on the steps. I'm riding the bike.
Yeah, and I'm like, I did? It's how when I've been swimming.
Yeah, right. It's just an accelerometer. That's all it is in there.
Exactly. I swam for half hour and it was like, I got 1,000 steps. And I'm like, great.
Well, okay, this has been great. We've only gotten through 3 of the 5, and we're really only in the middle of talking this third one. So I think we're going to need to come back and visit it, because, being healthy is, at the end of the day, that's the most important, because we're not making money doing this. We're not, we're not earning money in racing. We're doing this for fun, and it should be healthy. And I think it is important to have a healthy mindset in approaching training. And yes, you and I are guilty of not doing that, but I think our pendulum swings back to, okay, let's get healthy and be good. So.
Absolutely. Well, that was really fun. Thanks, John. I appreciate your Friday night once again.
Yeah, good talking. All right. Hey, have a healthy weekend.
You too.
Talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.